I, of course, am an energy efficiency professional, and I have very strong environmental values. In fact, they're probably the strongest value that I have is to be green and to be sustainable. And I've, studied for 11 years to be a sustainability professional, and I was a biologist, and now in energy efficiency. And I also obviously know a lot about it. I've worked in policy, I've worked in implementation, I've done the research, and I'm also earning good enough money, and I own my own house. So I should be what is basically regarded as, a dark green. So even in a social segmentation, I should be exactly at this, super green element of, really sustainable lifestyles and who does everything right. And then when I look at myself, I find that I am quite far removed from that ideal in a lot of ways. In some aspects I'm quite good because I was brought up by a family in Austria that is very good on conservation and wouldn't waste energy, and so I don't waste food. I wash all my clothes in cold water, and I wash my dishes by hand, and use full loads, and I turn the lights off and I turn appliances off, and so I do all these things right. And when I buy appliances, I buy the energy efficient ones, as long as I still like the look of them. But I make sure that energy is always a consideration when I particularly purchase appliances. But the things that I think I'm doing really badly and which throw my footprint right out of the sort of general footprint is I fly a lot. I really like traveling, but I also fly for work now because I do this big international project. So I'm ending up in Europe, which is on the other end of the world from New Zealand, at least twice a year. I'm trying to stay as long as possible, and when I'm in Europe I try to travel by train if I can, but I still end up flying a fair bit. And one flight from Wellington to Vienna is something like 17 tons of CO2. And in order for us to get down to like 2 degrees to get climate change at 2 degrees, we'd need 2.7 tons per person. And one of my flights, just one way, is 17 tons. So, I feel like I'm really, not doing very well on that aspect. But on the other hand, of course, I'm doing this work, which is really important and really good. And so hopefully, some of the good outcomes from that will, but it's something I'm really struggling with. The other thing is I've got my dream house on the beach. I'm a marine biologist. I grew up in Austria, no ocean. And I moved to New Zealand, and now I have a house on the beach, but it's 100 years old. You can't insulate it, there's no roof space, there's no floor space. It's really so old it should be burned to the ground, really. There's not much point in retrofitting it. And in New Zealand, all the legislation and all the builders and the building code and everything doesn't really help with being good in terms of retrofitting and building good buildings. The social norm is really bad, cold, drafty buildings. A lot of people get sick from asthma and mold, and you always have good ventilation because there's big holes in the doors and in the walls, and the average temperature in a New Zealand house is 12 degrees. In mine it's 10 in winter. So it's really cold. I ripped out the fireplace because a lot of us still have open fireplaces which just smoke the house out and which provide no warmth and are really bad for the environment and for your health. So at least I ripped that out and found a whole lot of asbestos behind it, and installed an efficient gas heater, but obviously without insulation, I still waste a lot of heat. And so I did what all New Zealanders do, which is I put on a beanie and I chuck on a jumper, and I toughen up and I sit in bed with my cats on top of me, and that's how I deal with the cold rather than overheating it. But of course for some people that is not good because they get very unhealthy, especially for little kids, and you can have mold problems and stuff like that. So it's really an issue that is very much a social norm in New Zealand, and it's a cultural issue. And I think those are sort of my two big embarrassments on energy: is the state of my house and of the building stock of my house and my flying behaviour. But I try to do right where I can. So.